It's 2 a.m. The room is dark. Your body is exhausted. But somewhere in your mind, a board meeting is in full session. You're replaying something you said at lunch. You're stress testing a decision that doesn't need to be made until next week. You're drafting the perfect response to a conversation that ended 3 hours ago. You're not anxious, you're not sad, you're just thinking, and you cannot stop. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. The people who struggle with this the most tend to be among the most intelligent, self-aware, and emotionally perceptive people you'll ever meet. The ones who notice everything, who feel everything, who care maybe more than is comfortable. So the question isn't just why can't they stop thinking? The deeper question, the one philosophers have circled for centuries, is whether a truly conscious mind was ever designed to be at peace. Psychologists call this pattern maladaptive rumination, the tendency of the mind to cycle back to the same thought loops, especially around uncertainty, unresolved social situations, or imagined future threats. But here's what the research consistently tells us, and what most people never actually hear. Overthinkers are not weak. Studies out of Yale and the University of Michigan have shown that in many cases, their brains are exceptionally good at pattern recognition, always scanning, always processing, always searching for meaning. The problem isn't the intelligence. It's that the system was never given a signal to stop. Neurologically, this comes down to two structures. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's center for planning, analysis, and self-reflection, tends to stay hyperactive in ruminators, even during downtime. And the default mode network, the brain's background processing system, keeps generating internal monologue long after it's needed. The result is a mind that is, essentially, always online, always auditing, always drafting responses. Here's what makes this psychologically significant, and I'd argue, philosophically important. This pattern rarely originates in adulthood. For many chronic overthinkers, the habit began in childhood, in environments where outcomes felt unpredictable, where moods shifted without warning, where a mistake could carry consequences that felt unknowable. In that context, a child's brain makes a very rational calculation. If I can think far enough ahead, if I can anticipate every possibility, maybe I can protect myself from what's coming. Overthinking, from this lens, isn't a developmental flaw. It's an elegant survival strategy, a highly intelligent nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. The tragedy isn't that it developed. It's that it kept running long after the threat was gone. Now here's where it gets more complicated, because not all rumination works the same way. Psychologists distinguish between two distinct types. The first is reflective rumination, an inward-turning process of understanding yourself, constructing meaning, processing emotion. When balanced, this is genuinely adaptive. It's linked to higher emotional intelligence and greater self-awareness. The second is brooding rumination, a more passive, distressing pattern of dwelling on problems without any movement toward resolution. This is where overthinking starts to extract a real cost, in sleep quality, in decision paralysis, in the quiet social anxiety that builds from analyzing every interaction afterward. Most chronic overthinkers oscillate between both. A moment of genuine reflection can slide, almost invisibly, into a spiral. Cognitive psychologists call this the illusion of mental progress. The mind feels like it's actively solving something, but it's looping. And because the activity feels productive, it can be extraordinarily difficult to notice when you've crossed from processing into ruminating. And here's the neurological detail that makes stopping even harder: dopamine. Your brain releases small amounts of dopamine during problem solving, including imagined problem solving. So when an overthinker runs through a scenario, the brain is being partially rewarded just for the activity itself, not for arriving at an answer, just for thinking. This is why just stop thinking about it is not only unhelpful, it's neurologically naive. If this is landing, subscribe. We go this deep every video. Here's something the research found that genuinely surprised psychologists. A 2013 study published in Psychological Science found that people who reported higher levels of rumination also scored significantly higher on measures of cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and anticipate how others feel. Overthinkers, on average, are more sensitive to social nuance, more attuned to the unspoken emotional texture of a room, more aware of how their words land before they say them. The very engine that makes overthinking so exhausting is also what makes these people remarkable. Their depth of perception, their attunement, their capacity to hold complexity. But perception without resolution is draining. And that's the quiet contradiction at the center of this. The more aware they become, the heavier the weight of that awareness. Socrates argued that the unexamined life is not worth living. But what happens when the examined life becomes the overexamined one? When the very faculty of self-reflection, the thing that separates us from animals, the thing philosophy has celebrated for millennia, becomes the source of suffering. Ancient Buddhist philosophy had a name for this: Papañca, the proliferation of mental concepts, the mind's tendency to multiply and elaborate experience far beyond what's actually present. The point wasn't that thought was bad. It was that attachment to thought was the root of suffering. Western existentialism arrived somewhere similar. Sartre observed that consciousness is always directed toward something. It's structurally incapable of being empty. To be aware is to reach outward, and to reach outward is to sometimes reach toward the wrong things for far too long. This is the price of consciousness, and it is a price that many of the most thoughtful minds in human history have quietly paid. So what do we actually do with this? The therapists who work most effectively with chronic overthinkers don't try to stop the thinking. They work on changing the relationship to the thoughts. Acceptance and commitment therapy teaches a technique called cognitive diffusion, the practice of observing a thought without fusing with it, watching the loop without being pulled in. Instead of "this situation is dangerous and I need to solve it," the reframe becomes, "my brain is generating a concern right now." One pulls you in, the other gives you distance, and that distance, even a few millimeters of psychological space, is where the freedom actually lives. Because here's the truth that psychology and philosophy, across centuries and cultures, keep arriving at independently. The mind cannot think its way out of every problem. Some things must be felt, decided, or released, not solved. For the overthinker, the goal isn't to silence the mind. It's to teach it, gently, that it is finally safe enough to rest. And maybe that's the most quietly profound thing about all of this. We carry cognitive patterns shaped by experiences we didn't choose. Understanding them doesn't erase them, but it does change how much power they have over us. The examined life is worth living. We just have to learn to examine it wisely. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think overthinking is a flaw, or is it actually a form of intelligence the world doesn't know what to do with? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to keep going deeper, subscribe. Next time, we're exploring why highly intelligent people often feel so alone, and the research behind it is genuinely surprising. See you in the next one.